All right, welcome back everyone with another War of Nova video brought to you by Hatter's Wrath from Hatter's Wrath Gaming. And today we're going to do the budget build and newcomer video. I was trying to think of the right words for it, but I think newcomer is a great way to put it right now since we do have so many players coming into the game as of the Rise to War Sunset news. I did speak about that in the introductory video, and hopefully you go take that check out. It's a quick 20-minute video, just really introduces War of Nova and what we're getting into, and this really takes a step further for those budget players and new players to really figure out what they're starting with and what they should really focus on as they start this journey or as they continue the journey, but without spending a lot or any money in the game. So, without further ado, we're going to jump into the game here. So, one thing I want to point out ahead of time is that I'm going to speak to a couple ships that we have tested. We have proven that they are capable of being strong ships to use at a low level. And this is not to say that these are exactly the ships that you need to focus on, but these are what we found in our tests so far and what we found to work against most players. And I say most players because there are going to be some really strong players out there that no matter what you throw at them, it's going to be a difficult fight. What I'm saying is, like, the average player, these are the ships that we found to be effective as far as PvP. And then I'm going to go over a couple budget builds for PvE success, that are good for tiling and capping with minimal losses for resources. So to start it off, we're going to take a look at Darkfang. So Darkfang is going to be the budget PvE ship I recommend. The number one ship. And the reason why I recommend it is because you can go up to a 300 at level 40, and 80% of the time, because it really depends on what enemies you come up against, but 80% of the time you're going to take minimal to no losses. And that's great for tiling and capping those big tiles because you don't want to be spending a lot of resources to get resources. So if you're spending nothing or almost nothing to get those tiles, perfect. So as you can see, my Darkfang is at Mastery 5, and it is level 46. So I'm going to have a lot of points in a lot of places. But there's two spots that I want to point to in particular that I think you should focus on. So for new players, you really want to focus on these bottom tier 1 abilities. You want to max out Competent Crew and Vampiric Attack. The Vampiric Attack is what's going to keep your team alive. It's tough that it's only one allied unit recovering HP on round start, but as you progress, you'll realize that all you're going to need is one unit. This setup right here, once you can get it leveled up a bit and invest those points in it, will really pay off, especially depending on the ships that you're starting with. You really want to find a ship that has damage mitigation early, and end game you want to get the Ograx Basilisk on it. That ship has a 50% counterattack rate. Let's see. Let me speak to it correctly. Oops. So we have the damage mitigation, the damage received minus 10%, and we have a 70% chance to attack for 50% normal damage. And then normal damage is reduced by 10%. We're not really worried about that. I've had crazy combat logs where I've done over 100,000, over 200,000 damage with these things. It really doesn't affect it that much. As you can see here, this is the build that I have set up in a more condensed view. The Basilisk is the #1 unit for this ship for a couple reasons. But the main thing we want to look at is the upper tier 0, for those budget builds, the really early starters. You're going to want to invest at least 1 point in exploit weakness and 1 point in the target weapons. And the reason why we do that is to get that damage mitigation. So it says target's next attack deal much less standard damage, and that's from 2 enemy strike craft. So if there's a person that's running 3 strike craft and one of them is usually the Harpy in PvE, we're talking about PvE, it will 2/3 of the time mitigate the damage from that Harpy, which is fantastic. That's what we really want to see. And honestly, it does come down to RNG a little bit, but that's no biggie. But basically, this will also build into the PvE build where you're just reducing the damage that you take. We use the exploit weakness, and I'm putting more points into that now as I level up, or I'm going to continue. So I'll have 4 more points in here if I hit level 50 with this ship, just to lower the defense of the enemy that I'm facing. As we get to the next level, so Tier 2 abilities unlock at Mastery 3. Tier 3 at Mastery 5, but we don't need to worry about that for these ships that we're talking about in the budget build. But you really want to max out these top, the main one here on the Tier 2 abilities. So if you have Mastery 3, definitely look at this. And then you're going to want to increase Tag Team as well. So this build is basically to minimize the damage that you're taking, healing your ships, and increasing your strike craft damage. It is almost entirely built around improving your ability to hit the enemy with your strike craft. So the more we can do to pump up the Basilisk, the better. And that comes down to the commanders I have as well. So I throw the Confusion immunity on here for those times that you face a Corruptor or similar ship. Sometimes they have Confusion on them. Sometimes they have the stun. I just all around keep the Confusion immunity. And I've also been facing some PvP with Moonveil, so I want to keep that Confusion on there. I know there's some commanders that they have been using that have the Confusion on them. So just keep it on there. It's a good placeholder. Next one I have is for the physical damage to ignore enemy defense for the first 4 rounds. As my Dark Fang gets stronger and I can add more points into damage dealing abilities, this will definitely come in play a lot more. But this is a commander that I actually look to swap around on a couple different ships that I use. It's very quick for you to just click and transfer a commander over. But the ignoring enemy defense is really big. And it comes into play for people who are using the Morningstar Strike Craft, which increases the defense by, I believe, 325 for the first 3 rounds. And there's some bugs with that. It's supposed to have a taunt on it, and it doesn't work. But that's besides the point. That'll be another video that we can go over. But ignoring the defense is definitely a strong commander to have, commander ability. The third one here, close range strike craft damage received minus 3%. This is key because, again, we want to mitigate the damage that we're receiving and increase the healing that we're getting so that our basilisks stay alive and deal that damage. So the less damage that they're taking, the better. And lastly here we have Elizabeth. She's fantastic for this ship. And then there's, I believe, another purple character that has the same exact ability that has a different subset of ships that she can be paired with, but every 2 rounds, one ally strikecraft recover 40% HP, and that's on top of the 80% each round that we're getting as well. So definitely can get a lot of heals out of this as our Basilisk does damage. So definitely want to keep that in mind. This is the PvE budget build. So remember that. Dark Fang, focus the healing, focus the mitigation, keep it alive. And you can take 300s like they're nothing. I have one right here where, I went up against a Corruptor, like I was saying, so they're tough, but I faced a Sylph and lost 0. Then against the Corruptor, Corruptors are always tough to come up against. They usually do the most damage just because they're difficult to fight. But I only lost 10 Basilisks. So that's a win in my book. I didn't really have to lose a lot of resources on that 300. Next ship we're going to focus on is the Cypher. So that's right here for me. So this is, in a lot of our opinions, the budget PvP god ship. And recently there was a player that posted a picture where they have this actually mastery level 25. So good on that person for pushing it to that level. But for our needs, all you really need is to hit Mastery 3. And that's very achievable early on in the game. If you're not spending a lot of money, but you're spending a little bit, you can probably get it. You get the green schematics that you can use to raise it up pretty much every chest. And if you're pulling the Dominion side chest, you'll probably get a few of the Cypher schematics. So this ship, like I said, is the one to pick for PvP for budget. And the main skills we want to look at are First Blood. We want to max that out as soon as possible. Max out Unstable Energy as soon as possible. Max out Damage Booster as soon as possible. And then put as many points in these two as possible. Usually rule of thumb is if you have a lower mastery, we have 5 here, 5 here. Now, if you're early on in the levels, you don't have enough to fully max all these 3 out. You want to at least make sure that you have at least 1 point in each of these, because these are the damage dealing skills that you are going to be focusing on for the ship. You still want to max these out, but these are important. Another thing to note is that we have a healing skill here, and this is going to be key for those early levels, beginning of the season when you're trying to level up the Cypher. You're going to want to invest in these a little bit and pull points from other places just to put them here so that you're not losing a lot of the ships. This build does not really have any mitigation or anything to save your strike craft from getting destroyed. So you really benefit from this, and it's not a huge deal. It's 2 targets every 2 rounds. It's not fantastic, but it does enough to keep you going. Now, as far as my build, I probably have a build that's a little bit unorthodox. I have a commander that deals confusion. I have the physical damage ignores enemy defense by 15%, so same as the other one on him. I have an initiative booster commander, which I wanted to throw on here just to make sure that my Cypher can hit first. I know the initiative is quite low, and I want to find another commander that can get the initiative higher as well. But for right now, I'm using Gorak. I'm going to test it out. I was using a different commander before this that I wasn't really sure if I needed that ability that he had. So I'm trying this one out, see how it goes, see if that increased initiative helps out any. And then lastly, we have Bradley. Bradley is a must-have for the Cypher build, at least in my opinion, because he heals all strike craft. Now, essentially, you could come up against a ship that has heal block and it will stop him from healing, but usually those ships are wasting points in that skill where they can use them on a damage skill or something else that could debuff you. Um, but this will keep you alive, and it really depends. Sometimes my harpies get wiped out pretty quickly, and so it's not doing as much healing because it's only 21%, so it doesn't seem like a lot. But when you're healing um, each group of your ships and all three of them by 21% ends up adding up to a lot. So I definitely think to keep Cypher alive, you need that healing across the board. There's not really a good PvE look at that ship other than the early game healing. Um, a lot of these ships will take a lot of damage hitting higher tiles, and they're not really good for that. But those are the basic two that I would recommend for budget builds as far as PvE and PvP right off the bat. Now, those ships are both in Dominion, which is the evil side. Although we don't really have a lot of context to the lore and the backstory on everything, but those two are here. So I'm going to highlight real quick the Dread. Not recommended for anything other than when you get Mastery 3. It has a siege damage bonus, which is helpful if you do get that and you can get it Mastery 3. Cool, get it high enough to max that siege bonus, and then that helps you with the capturing stations and crossings aspect. Staying in Dominion, we have quite a few purples in here that we have found to be helpful early budget build. The main one's going to be the Machina. This has been a popular one across the team. I'm not really going to go into too much of the commanders because it really depends on how you want to build it. I think the energy damage one is a key one, though, because he does have a pretty high elemental stat. And I have, because we've been facing people who are using radiation, I just have the decreased radiation damage received ability. But this ship has been really strong R0, mastery level 0. And what we're really doing is we're maxing both mains, the bottom, and the top skills. After that, it's really just going to be, putting points somewhere that you feel like they could be helpful. And that's a lot based on what strike craft you're running. So this top one will, give a buff to medium strike craft, and the bottom one will reduce damage received by close range strike craft and increase the damage dealt by long range strike craft. So if you're not running any mediums, use this one. If it really depends on what you're doing, but we really want to look at this ability right here. And this, despite being triggered on rounds 3, 6, and 9, it is a 100% chance to evade the next instance of damage. Very key. So most battles are decided in the first 3 rounds, and that's why I said the triggers in 3, 6, 9 is not great. But if you stay alive long enough to hit round 3 and evade, and that's 2 allied units too, it's not just 1, but if you evade the first instance of damage for 2 units, hopefully you get lucky enough that one of them is a harpy and it doesn't get a follow-up. But it definitely helps, the longevity and staying alive long enough. On the top, we have the main skill that we're looking at. It triggers on round 1, and when you max it, it pushes the confusion to 2 rounds instead of the original 1 round. Fantastic. A lot of these ships, like I said, focus on those first 3 rounds for dealing damage. And if we can take out 2 strike craft with confusion in those first 2 rounds, we're looking pretty solid. We're only getting hit by a capital ship and 1 strike craft. On top of that, we're dealing 300% damage to 2 units, which is quite a number. Now, another cool thing, and I've been looking at combat logs, and I'm not 100% sure how the microwave blast works because the way it's worded, it seems like it might be just one round, but there's no round counter on it. Like a lot of these will have what rounds they're in, so I don't know if this is every round or one time, although it does look like it might be every round. But against one enemy unit, you'll deal 90% standard damage, but then you're going to also inflict 90% radiation damage every round for a round. So this is where we get into some of the semantics behind why ships are strong. Power focuses on physical attacks, similar to Rise of War's physical, and elemental is going to be like magic attacks type of deal. So radiation is part of the elemental, and these stats are based on the ship that we're fighting's same stats. So if I'm fighting a ship that has high power, low elemental, machine is going to be great. If it's vice versa, then maybe another ship that deals physical against an elemental will be better. But that skill does standard and radiation. So it can hit both of those, and it does an extra 90%. So I haven't gotten it to 100%, but that's 100% damage from each category. And we're going to see that in multiple rounds. So that's a fantastic ship right here. Obviously, when we get to mastery level 3, which I'm close to, but not there yet, we're going to want to focus on a couple other spots. So one of the main ones we have here is irradiated rounds. This is probably the one that I'm going to go with. It increases your standard attack damage, which we have right here. But it's also going to increase your radiation damage, or deal additional radiation damage. Again, right here. So when we start stacking those irradiated rounds onto the microwave blast, we're going to start seeing that damage creep up pretty quickly. And this one only triggers on rounds 1, 5, and 9. It's a 10% chance of inflicting stun against 2 enemy strike craft. Not sure if it's worth it, especially because this 75% energy damage seems to only work if there's a stun effect that ends. So I'm not really sure yet how that really plays into it. Not sure if that's good, but against all enemies, you're going to increase the thermal and radiation damage received. Fantastic. We're going to increase the amount of damage we're doing. And like I said, this build has been very powerful. It's a strong ship. Budget build for sure. Definitely recommend looking into what works best for you for that one. I'm going to highlight real quick the Widow. This is one that was pitched by one of our players as being a potential budget build that has potential. Still needs some true testing to see how it does, but I don't really have a lot of points put in here as it's a lower level. And actually just got this ship today, to be honest with you. But we want to make sure that we're maxing the 2 main skills and the 2 top skills, secondary skills. What we're looking at here is that we're going to inflict damage over time that deals 30% damage for 3 rounds. So on round 1, we set this, and the next 3 rounds, they'll take damage. And that's going to obviously increase over the period of this. But when you max it, it's a skill that cannot be evaded. And that's key. That means we will 100% of the time deal that damage every round for those 3 rounds. And that's awesome. As far as the top one, we're going to increase all strike craft defense by whatever percent. I'm not sure what this maxes out at, but I mean, even just 40% is a huge amount. Lasso is going to hit 2 enemy strike craft, dealing damage and inflict stun for 1 round. So this is key because that stun is automatically inflicted if those attacks hit, and that triggers on round 1, which is awesome. So we're going to get a round 1 stun right off the bat, and that'll be against 2 enemy strike craft. So I'm always looking out for these skills that hit multiple strike craft. Those are usually the ones we want to see, or all strike craft. That's where we're going to get the most damage potential. And then this bottom skill here, we're going to look at the light strike craft damage increase a little bit more in depth. We're still doing some testing on this, and I want to see for myself what to expect from it. But the Harpy is a light strike craft, so seeing this damage increase on the Harpy could end up being a humongous plus, because that is the go-to ship in the game. It provides debuff and has an automatic or 100% chance of follow-up, so definitely a powerful ship. Shielding shot and moment of clarity at the moment we're not interested in really looking at. And I don't really have a lot going on here to really check out, but this with the 50% stun chance is pretty good. But then you look, it's triggered rounds 3, 6, and 9. 75% chance recovering, certain percentage. Increased proc chance increases to 100% when maxed. It ends up not being a ton. I believe it ends up being 20% when this is maxed. So it's, every round, it's only a medium strike craft, boo, and only 20%, boo. Not fantastic. Healing, but we really want to focus on these to start off with, as far as the budget build. And take a look at Sunder real quick. I think this is another budget build ship. I've had great success in PvE with this. Running this build right here where we focus these 2 abilities, getting that heal. The key thing about this is that it's healing upon dealing damage. So if you have a ship that's like Basilisk that's hitting with counterattacks, this might actually be a great build. I personally haven't had the chance to test it yet, but I want to here. As our season's kind of in limbo right now as we wait for the next season. But this skill right here, I think has a lot of potential, and I'm definitely going to explore this more. Ograx, Arcos, and Tyrannus, and Heavy Strike Craft all get damage dealt increases. That's a lot of ships that encompasses. Each one of these has 3 ships, like 3 pathways. And the Heavy Strike Craft, we can also look at the Morning Stars from Sovereign, Vanguard Morning Stars. So this could be a very niche ability, as long as we can keep those ships alive. But Ograx Basilisks are going to fall under this, so that could be something that mitigates that minus 10% normal damage. And then we want to get at least 1 into each of these. So the reason why I like this one, you get that defense decrease for 1 round. And I don't really look to put a lot in that right now, but it's nice to just have, at least for a round, that damage debuff. But this one right here for the capital ship standard attack damage increase, it's not really a big deal right now because we don't have any abilities that I would really dump into to see that effect, because these are both 1 unit. Not really worried about that. Once we start getting into these abilities, I might think about changing up what I think of for that ability, but not going to look into that too much. And then, I always like to highlight any heals. Again, this is round 6, and it recovers for Arco Strike Craft, but then they can't heal after that. Honestly, a lot of the time, your Harpies, which are the main Arcos unit you're using, don't last to round 6, or you have very little of them. So I'm not sure really how effective that ability would be, unless it hits like 500% HP and you can heal most of your Harpies. But There's a decay rate on what destroyed ships can be healed as rounds increase. So there is a cap to that, and not sure how useful that be. But this ability is huge right here, and I definitely think it's something that should be explored. The Overlord's going to be another good one that's potentially a budget build. I just threw some random commanders on here, but this is a ship that's proved pretty decently strong against the Moonveil. And I think once you hit Mastery level 3, it starts to open up a little bit more. Yeah, you have an automatic confusion right here for 1 round on a capital ship, which is fantastic. Chance to inflict silence, not bad. But for this one, we really want to focus on these two right now for the lower levels. So we have the decreased for the first 2 rounds allied and enemy strikecraft damage. Yes, it decreases your own damage, but that can be mitigated with some of the other abilities that are here. Mainly this one right here basically counteracts this one. So you're just debuffing the other ship, and then you're bringing yours back up to normal. This ability right here is pretty nice. So you every 3 rounds for 2 enemy strike craft, you decrease their defense and you have a chance of inflicting confusion. This is 45% at level 5, so I'm guessing it's going to be much, much higher once I get that to level 10 for inflicting confusion. So that's going to be great, but we're going to see a big defense decrease as well, so that's going to mitigate this decrease of your own damage as well. So, this does affect you, but there's abilities here that increase your damage. And then we can even double down on that, and once we get to the higher levels, even add on this buff against any enemy that's confused, deal more damage. So, pretty nice ability there. And again, highlighting the heals. These are very rare abilities to come by, but if you have an ability that deals damage and then heals, they usually end up being pretty strong abilities. And this one heals 2 allied strikecraft and deals damage to enemy strikecraft. So definitely something to look into in your build if you're interested in trying to get some heals out of this. And then I think the last one on here, as far as the Dominion ships, is the Corruptor. This really pops off at Mastery level 3 because you can get this heal block, which is great against ships like Moonveil that have a ton of healing. Unfortunately, it doesn't hit until round 4. So you really got to find ways to keep your ships alive until then. So I do want to mention that it's just something to play around with or think of as a counter. Unfortunately, as far as the budget build video, I'm not going to be looking at any of these gold ships for the budget. I really don't think any of them stand out at the lower masteries. I have used the Kraken, and I think this is a good build. I don't really think you need too many of these skills over here. The problem is you don't have enough points at the lower masteries to really fill out the build how I foresee it. And that's really where it comes up short, but there's a lot of other ships that come up short and for similar reasons as the Kraken as to why it's not a budget look. Now, we're going to jump into Sovereign. I don't have a ton of these ships, and honestly, we don't really tend to use a lot of them. The main one that our team uses is the Moonveil, but as far as I know, you do need to get this one leveled up a bit before it really starts popping off. But definitely recommend that as a ship to put on your wish list and really work for. Same with the Hammerhead. This one needs to be R5 to start popping off, but it does have potential. And I think the Mjolnir, I haven't seen a whole ton of it, but I believe this is another one that you really have to level up to start using well. There are strong ships on the Sovereign side, but most of them are not going to be a budget ship. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of information, but the two ships that we have been testing out for budget lower levels are the Emberhelm and the Resolute. As far as PvE and PvP, really just trying to work on these two ships and see what kind of potential they have. The main one here that I'm going to highlight to end off, though, is the Radiant. We have a couple players that have different builds that seem to be pretty powerful, but the one thing that I want to really highlight here is the siege damage. So this ship gets the highest bonus to the siege damage dealt in the plus 15. And when you max out that skill, you have access to this damage healing skill. The only downside is that this only heals one allied unit, and it's every 3 rounds, starting after round 1. So if this ship has higher initiative and the other strike craft that you have don't get hurt yet, that round 1 heal pretty much is useless and it won't heal anything. So that's kind of the unfortunate side of this. But like I said, there are some powerful builds you can do with this that, you know, really buff your team and deal some good damage and have the stun chance. And it's definitely one to keep in mind on leveling up. And if anything, you just use it like a siege battery like I do. As far as some of these other ships, we haven't seen a whole lot of these at lower levels being used effectively. You know, I've still fed Mastery 5. I haven't even used it because I just haven't seen anyone else use it to get an idea of what a build would look like for it. But I have seen Starweaver and Sunwarden as some decent ships that have been doing quite a bit of damage. But again, I just don't see them as being the budget builds. You know, I think right now we have a good solid list to go off of for those new players. And again, like I said, Darkfang and Cypher, all you really need to focus on right now. And if you get Machina, perfect. That'll be another powerful addition to your ships early on. So moving forward, I'm going to do more videos like this where I really deep dive into what's been effective for us so far. You know, a lot of people see me pop into the Nova chat if there's any questions, concerns, or something that you are interested in learning more about. As far as War Nova, you know, feel free to reach out to me. There's also a lot of people that are in our Tower Discord now. We had a huge influx of players to the game, but also we did a lot of recruiting ourselves. So we are building ship guides with more detail and information. And, you know, I didn't want to dive too deep into my notes because I want to make sure that it was quick, easy to understand and build off of so that you can really succeed. And I focus really more on the skills because honestly, it's going to really depend on which group you start with, on which strike craft you're going to get. Let me go into here. You know, we started Tyrannus. We get Tyrannus first, and you can see that I didn't even bother hitting this tier. So it's really going to depend. I mean, I'm always looking for these like tier 1 and tier 2 ships that have that damage decrease. They're going to stay alive a little bit longer. You know, taking a look at Ograx, if that's where you start, Omega, Terra, doesn't matter. As far as the good side, the Morningstar right here is one of the better ships. It's a tank like the Cyclops. It has the heavy plating that decreases damage received, and also has this ability right here. The only problem is that, again, there's a bug on this strike craft where the taunt doesn't work the correct way. You want to be careful of, but honestly, what you're really looking for is your ships to have those correct abilities, and as you level up, you'll be able to start plugging in the ships that the strike craft that match what your ship's looking for. And that's why I really didn't want to spend a lot of time on that side of the build. And I didn't really want to dive too much into the commanders as much either. It's going to be a lot of trial and error, what you find works best for you or what you have. But I think this Cypher build's a really good start. And it has done a lot of good things for me so far. So definitely take a look at those, and I have a ton of ships out. Most of those are siege. And like I said, just feel free to reach out and find things that will work for you and work for your budget. I don't necessarily think you need to spend a lot of money right off the bat. I don't want you to dive in and be like, oh, I spent a ton of money, but I don't really like this game. We started this game jumping into it to just have fun and get together, get away from Rise to War, but still keep our community together. And we've had a good time. We enjoy it. We don't really have a lot of money dumped into it. We have a couple people that have spent good chunks, but I don't think you need to really push the boundaries of your wallet to enjoy this game. The Cypher is a go-to even for higher spender players. You'll see them bring that to the battlefield. So that should say a lot about that ship. Being a blue, it's still relevant. But again, feel free to subscribe to my page. I'm going to be dropping more videos like this that go into detail. And just keep an eye out on what's going on. I try to be vocal in the community, and get big shout out to Tower and those guys. We have guys that are just geeking out about the game and breaking everything down and seeing what works and what doesn't, and just reading combat logs and running the numbers. And I think that gives us a leg up on really the mechanics of the game, to allow us to be competitive and enjoy it in a really fun manner. So really appreciate that. And I'm hoping Revolving Games can definitely get their feet underneath them and get this game to where it could be moving forward, so that we can continue to enjoy it and put out videos like this where we help out players and point them in the right direction. So with that, out for the night. Look forward to the next videos. See ya.